Hey folks, last night was the top 6 results on American Idol, and Casey Abrams was eliminated. I just knew it was going to be Jacob Lusk, so I was a little bit surprised, but I was not at all disappointed. I was actually happier to see Casey go than to see Jacob go, because the fun Jacob seems to be back, and I want him to stick around for at least until next week when he's probably definitely going to be eliminated. What is probably definitely? No, I think he will be eliminated next week, but I think Casey should have gone about 5 weeks ago. It just proves that the judges' save is completely pointless. Because none of the saves over the 3 years that they've had to save, none of them have been able to crack the top 3. So what's the point? I think it actually makes it harder on him too, because it's hard enough once you're eliminated from American Idol to get a record deal, because you're poisoned to the record labels because America has rejected you. Now, at least if you're a surprise elimination, you might be able to bank on that. But if America rejects you twice, your chances are shot. Of course, I think Casey does have a future in music. You know, he plays a lot of instruments, and he always has the Casey Abrams American Idol Lounge to fall back on. So I think he's going to be just fine. Not rich and famous fine, but he's going to be fine. Anyway, at the beginning of the show, the top 6 took a trip to the UK to celebrate the royal wedding. Are you freaking kidding me? They couldn't find something better for these kids to do. I guess I just assumed naturally that American Idol would be the one show that I could watch without having to hear about that dang wedding. I honestly didn't know that many people cared so much about royalty anymore. What does royalty do besides get born rich and hoard wealth? And weddings are a drag anyway. I've been to 3 weddings in my life, and even for people that I know and care about, they're very, very boring. And I can only imagine that this is one of the more boring events for the top 6. They got to hang out and eat fish with a bunch of people that have never heard of them, and celebrate a wedding for a couple of people that they don't even know, and the bride and the groom weren't even there. What was the point of having the party if the bride and the groom weren't there? The only person that I even recognized from this segment was Fred Willard, and the only place I ever remember seeing him before is when he played a virgin priest that wouldn't sleep with Blanche Devereaux on an episode of The Golden Girls. Anyway, next was the top 6 singing a Carole King medley that seemed to drag on forever and ever. I thought James and Haley sounded good together at the beginning. If they do duets on Results Night again next week, maybe James will get lucky and get a duet with a lady for a change. Scotty was surrounded by a bunch of teenage girls for his part. Once again, I think it's an attempt to throw him under the school bus. If you're a conspiracy theorist and you believe that the producers of the show do things to sway public opinion and the outcome, I think they want Scotty gone. I think they're trying to go for a Lauren and James finale, and by constantly associating Scotty with little girls, it oftentimes causes people to dismiss his talent. We see it happen with every teenage boy on the show. It happened with Aaron Kelly and David Archuleta. As the season winds down and more people start to say that the little girls are the only ones voting for them and keeping them around, which I totally don't believe. Otherwise, Sanjaya would have won season 6 if little girls had that much voting power. But it causes a lot of people to flat out dismiss them. And it's not just on American Idol. I know people that hate Justin Bieber and Miley Cyrus and have never even heard them sing, but since their biggest fan base is young girls, it's not cool to like them. So I think they're kind of throwing Scotty under the school bus. Somebody sent me a link to a kids poll too, taken by 15,000 children now. Like, I don't know how old they were, but children, teens, I don't know. But the overwhelming majority are behind Laura and Alaina, and Scotty and James are pretty neck and neck, which I find pretty believable, because I don't think Scotty is like the main focus of little girls. I just wouldn't believe that. Anyway, next was the Ford music video with the top 6 singing Our House and drawing a house and furniture with magic markers. I guess they drew a decent little house. At least they didn't draw that awful, leaky, haunted, spider-infested mansion that they were forced to live in for about 3 days earlier in the season. It was pretty dull, though, as far as Ford music videos go. We've seen this one done about 1,000 times before. I think they've run out of ideas. Next was Crystal Bowersox singing Riding with the Radio, not one of my favorite songs from her CD. It sounds a little more country than I remember it being on her CD, and Crystal did seem to be more comfortable singing her own music than she did on the show last year. And I thought she sounded great as usual, but if the whole point of coming on the show was to promote her album, I don't think this song was enough to make that much of an impact. And just like I wonder with Lita Wise, I wonder how Crystal would have stacked up if she were on this season. You know, last season, it seemed like every time a season 8 contestant came on, they mopped the floor with the season 9 contestants. You had Chris and Danny and Allison and Adam, and they just completely mopped the floor with them. And I don't see the same thing happening this year, so that's not a good sign for Crystal and Lee, but I guess it's a good sign for this season's contestants, I suppose. Anyway, next questions for the contestants sent in by fans. Well, we haven't done this in a couple of years. I wish they had asked some juicier questions, though, because most of these questions were very boring. And then there were like tweets rolling on the screen. I guess they were tweets rolling on the screen behind Ryan Seacrest at the same time. I was trying to read and listen, and my brain could only process one thing at a time. Casey's question was, who would you like to do a duet with? Did any of you have any doubt that he was going to name somebody that off the wall that nobody has ever even heard of? So that was pretty boring. Jacob, when did you discover the range in your voice? When he was a kid in church. Oh, what a surprise. Lauren, what's the hardest thing about being an Idol finalist? Of course, it's being away from her family, and she took the opportunity to give a shout out to tornado victims. Very smart thing to do, because tornadoes have been ripping the South up and down over the past few weeks, and I think they said it's been the deadliest year since 1973. Every time I turn on the TV, it seems like there's a tornado warning. Very scary, but very smart to give a shout out to them. Scotty, have you ever had a pre-Idol job? Well, apparently he wiped down tanning beds for his mom at the tanning salon, and he also had a job at a grocery store, and he proved that by reciting 4017 as the lookup code for Granny Smith apples. Oh, that's an easy one. That's one of the first ones you learn, right along with 4011 for bananas. Tell me the code for a rutabaga, and then I'll be impressed. See, here I am, talking about dull and boring questions. And if I had been in Ryan Seacrest's place, I would have been quizzing Scotty on grocery store produce codes. So I don't guess I could have made it much better, but still. James, have you played with a band before American Idol? Don't these people learn how to use Google before they ask questions that they could have answered just as easily themselves by looking it up on Google? Haley, who was your all-time favorite past Idol contestant? She names about 75 of them. Of course, she said Adam Lambert, and you knew she was going to mention Crystal because Crystal was still there. On to the results in random order. This week they did it differently. They showed a clip of the performances and the judges' comments with an afterthought from Jimmy Iovine. I think I like this post-performance Jimmy better than the rehearsal Jimmy, and it does really seem like they're setting him up to be a judge for next season, which was probably the plan all along. I guess I wouldn't mind that too much. Anything's got to be better than Steven Tyler and his, "oh, that was beautiful" comments. Initially, I liked the idea of Jimmy as a resident mentor, and in theory, it probably would have worked out good if there had been some good judges. But what's ended up happening is that Jimmy is just some tough guy that they meet up with once a week. They can take his advice or leave it. People forget what Jimmy said by the time their performance is over, and then the judges coat the performances with high fructose corn syrup, and so nobody improves. Everybody just coasts along to the point where we might as well just pick the winner at random. Just pull a name out of a hat, let any of them win. Anyway, the first up was Haley Reinhart. Jimmy said that Haley's problem is that she doesn't know who she is, and that's the same thing I said about Haley 5 or 6 weeks ago. And it's what the judges should have told her all along. Instead, they compared her to like 75 different people and praised each and every one of them. Boy, she don't like the criticism on the big stage, does she? She had to be censored, and Ryan had to tell her to watch her mouth. She said that she thinks she knows who she is. She said that there's some rock and some soul and some rock and roll and some blues. That's Jimmy's point. Throw in some country and R&B and a little bit of jazz and just call your first album Cesspool. Haley was safe, though, you know, and then she had to ask, well, somebody please tell me. The judges should have told her weeks ago. That's the problem. Next was Scotty. Jimmy thinks that Scotty has a magnificent subtlety, but that he's afraid he might get lost. That subtlety might get lost in the competition. Jimmy said if you let Johnny Cash on the show, you wouldn't tell him to spread his wings. Actually, that might be the most appropriate thing to tell him. And if I were there on the show and Johnny Cash showed up, I wouldn't tell him a damn thing. I'd just hightail it right on out of there. The man's been dead for 8 years. Next was Lauren Alaina. Jimmy Iovine thinks that Lauren only hears the negative. Wait a minute, there was negative? She agrees with that. Oh, that boy that she dragged up onto the stage and sang to, she didn't even know him. That wasn't her boyfriend. She just dragged some random intern up on the stage. That was very strange and a very stupid thing to do. Next, Casey Abrams. When they were showing back clips from Casey's performance, there was this funny little bit that we didn't get to see on Wednesday night. When Casey threw his hat into the crowd, Steven Tyler tried to catch it with his pencil. I don't know why I laughed so hard at that. I just found it very hilarious. Anyway, Jimmy's biggest problem with Casey was, of course, his growling. Of course, the same thing could be said about Haley Reinhart. But Jimmy said that Casey needs to realize that the family dog does not vote. That line alone makes me want to see Jimmy Iovine as a judge next season. I want to see him as a judge this season. Just go ahead and get rid of Steven Tyler. There's just no rehabilitating him. Send him back to the Betty Ford Clinic or something. Next was James. Jimmy thinks that James could win if he picks the right songs, but he seems to be still a little bit sore at James for defying him and singing heavy metal back some weeks ago. Next was Jacob. Jimmy thought that perhaps Jacob went in the wrong dressing room and was dressed to be on Dancing with the Stars. I think what saved Jacob was the smiling and the fun and the laughing. Fun Jacob is so much more likable than Stick in the Mud Jacob. Next was Bruno Mars singing Lazy Song, and I think it's quite a boring song too, but I love the lazy dog laying on the couch behind him. Apparently, from what I read, that this performance was taped like 4 weeks ago, so it's not like it was live on the show. Anyway, finally onto the results, completely at random. Jacob was safe, and so it was between Scotty and Casey. It was quite obvious when it was between the two of them. I doubt that Scotty was even in the bottom three. They just kind of gave that idea, because a lot of people will think, I think this is another instance of throwing Scotty under the bus, because when people see you up there, they think you're not safe, and a lot of people assume that that means that your fans are going to vote even harder for you. I think a lot of people it's gonna cause a lot of people to dismiss him. So I don't know. I wish they would have told us the bottom three. Just go ahead and tell us. What's the point? But who knows? Randy Jackson made that gesture like he wasn't happy with the results. Oh, screw Randy Jackson. Casey saying, I put a spell on you one more time. Very growly and very creepy. Casey apparently thinks that he has a license to put his lips on everybody's face. He's really lucky that he did not get punched. I did think it was cute the way that he ended it with Haley Reinhart. We all know he's in love with her. He said in interviews today that they're not a couple. They're not dating or none of that. But nobody believes that. Anyway, next week's theme is Then and Now. 2 songs. Each contestant sings 2 songs. One from the 1960s and one current. I don't know what they consider current, but on American Idol, 60s is current, isn't it? Anyway, I'll see you folks later.